I don't know why my iPad is naturally like kind of like, I'm sure there's a setting that can stop that, but I apologize.
Happy New Year, Ed.
Happy New Year, Doc.
What is today's date?
Today's date. I'm not good with dates, but I have an Apple Watch now, so it's January 5th from when I gather on my
January 5th, 2022. You are
2022.
getting ready to do a new project that is a year-long yo-yo project, which is no big deal. I yo-yo all year. What's the big deal?
Me too. Yeah, I feel like it shouldn't be a big deal. It's not a big deal. I guess I kind of like probably inflate the nature of the deal just by like talking about it, and then like yeah, it's not a big deal. But I am going to be playing just the one wooden fixed axle yo-yo for 2022, which is a kind of a 10-year anniversary reboot of what I initially did in 2012.
So not just you're not just playing fixed axle all year. You're not just playing wood all year. You are playing with one single yo-yo. What happens, Ed, if it breaks?
So I do actually have actually what we did is we took all of my yo-yos and they're in a big IKEA cabinet, and that's like kind of just like a display. And I had to take like the other ones like from around the house, and I kind of like shoved them all into it. I can go in there in a minute and kind of show you. But I gave my 13-year-old son the key to it and just kind of said, "All right, I get this back, 1 year from today, 1/1/2023, and I can play whatever I want to." But the ones that I have out of it, on top of it, are, I mean, there's this one in my pocket, obviously, and then I have one identical one to this, which Andre and Colin sent me. And then I have the proto that I got from Colin, which is of this. And actually I have another proto, which is slightly different to this, but I've played it like virtually not at all. So, if worse comes to worse and I slam it on something, which I don't play these lightly, like I definitely do, go pretty hard with them. So the odds of this guy making it like the entire year, I'd be interested to like see how that would pay out, because it's not super high. And actually, the original A yo-yo in 2012, we did the same thing. Steve sent me 2 spares, and I didn't break one, but I lost one like a few months into it, and I was devastated. It's literally the only yo-yo I've ever lost, and it was like the one that I picked for that entire year. Luckily, the second one broke in just as great. So
You just kind of surprised me there. I asked you earlier, making sure I was pronouncing your name right, Haponik. It never even occurred to me I was mispronouncing the name of the yo-yo, which I'd always thought was the A or the eh.
eh.
But it's a long A sound.
That's kind of like, I guess that's kind of the part of the appeal to it, to the whole thing to me, is I have no idea how you should say that, because I'm not Canadian. And when we initially devised it, it was like, oh, well, we'll call it the because it's like, kind of quirky as a mashup between my initials EH and just the thing that Steve Buffalo, I assume, is saying right now in Canada. such a ridiculous and hopefully innocuous stereotype.
So what's your 13-year-old son's name?
Alex.
12/01, January 1st, 2023. Hey, Alex, I need that key, right? Like it's like midnight.
Yeah, we'll probably talk about it like before then. Like I'll probably be like, so like in like early December, be like, remember that key? Because like, I mean, his room is a total disaster. Like the likelihood of him finding the key wherever he loses it in 10 minutes, let alone like 11 months, 12 months, is about as high as this guy making it the entire year unscathed. So yeah, it'll take a little bit of luck and maybe some forewarning. Hey, it's getting close.
So we'll have to catch up later in the year or next year and find out what the first yo-yo you come back to is.
Hmm.
If you even come back to yo-yo, maybe you'll be like, hey, just hang on to that key. I don't need it. We're good. But what was the last like non a yo-yo you threw?
It was actually the end part two unknown edition. That was actually it. Yeah, and that's not like just like kissing Doc Pop's butt. That was actually like I went through like several of just kind of like not necessarily my favorite metal and responsive yo-yos, and also like no jive yo-yos and like just stuff I like to play a lot. I went through a lot of the ones that are kind of like most quirky, and interesting, like the Cubit from Corco, and a couple of freehand zeros that I had that like Takeshi modded really well. A couple of kind of slimline responsives that have a very specific feel. I mean, like the Weekender, the Luftwerk Daytona, a lot of those, like the RSO Silver Bullet reboot in titanium. Like those are such interesting yo-yos, and like they have such a weird feel to them, that I knew it would be nice to kind of have like a tactile memory of just like what that's like. But yeah, the last one that I actually threw and did some tricks with before before New Year's Eve came to a close was that black unknown RSO, the end. So.
Shout out to Brian Figueroa for getting National Trick Innovator of 2021.
Definitely, that was so wonderful for that to come to pass.
So
Couldn't be more deserved.
Let's talk about this homie, Catch
Yay!
Joy, your decade, if you're pronouncing it.
Decade.
So this is a great yo-yo. It's it's got this little flare on the side, which is pretty different. I don't think I've seen any of the. This is actually my first A that I have. In
no,
my
none
collection.
of the ones like that.
Yeah. Tell us about what's going on with the 10-year anniversary of the decade.
Yeah, it's really incredible. I mean, like I say it's not like a big deal, like for it to happen or for me to do this every year. Like it's a really big deal for me to have released, through Andre and through the craftsmanship of Colin Leland, 10 different incarnations of this thing is pretty amazing. And like the support we've received has been like really just like heartwarming and wonderful. But we had the original A yo-yo that Steve Buffle designed in Canada. We kind of like prototyped the thing on his like drill press in his garage, and I still have those original like drill pressings, which actually play really well. But at the end of the first version in 2012, Andre like really saw like, hey, this is like a yo-yo with a cool story, and like I had been doing like the 365 yo-yo tricks stuff with it, like with that yo-yo exclusively, obviously. So it had a little bit of like visibility, I guess, and so he wanted to make it for real and have people be able to buy it. And there was no way Steve Buffle could have done that. He was a tax just making the one wood one for me, and so we asked Colin, who was making the Irving yo-yos with timber, and he had made a few other designs at that point, if he could do this yo-yo, and he like knocked it out of the park, and we were able to like make a production run of it. And so then every subsequent year after that, I think with one exception, but then another year we did too, Colin produced the A yo-yo for us, and we gradually started changing it, and we took advantage of the wood thread axle guts that he had designed for his yo-yos, which are really, really cool. Just phenomenal craftsmanship. That it's an all wood, screw together design is just amazing. And then we kind of gradually adjusted like the rim shape, the width. There's only a few elements that really haven't changed, and really it's this profile. It's this kind of like slope of the shoulder on the inner hub there. And that to me is kind of what makes it feel the way it feels, in regeneration and in any kind of looping, and also when you kind of balance the thing, it fits me really well. But I think otherwise, virtually every part of the yo-yo has changed at some point. And with this last one, the decade, we tried to kind of go back to formula and go back to something similar to the original one. but at the same time, maybe making a few slight tweaks or bringing in elements of previous versions that we liked a lot.
And just kind of, I took mine apart here.
Mm-hmm.
This probably looks a lot different than the original
Yes.
Decade. They didn't have the removable axles like this, right? That's a newer system.
Right. You know what? I'll actually hang on. I'll take you on a quick tour over here.
Word up.
Follow me. Internet world.
Whoa.
This is my abode, and we're just gonna walk through it over here. Hey, Stacy.
I'm watching some trashy show. Don't embarrass me.
Okay, I'm not gonna embarrass you.
It's really trashy.
I just have to get my original yo-yo from the yo-yo apartment right there. It's retired, so it doesn't actually like to get thrown. So I don't actually consider that part of the ones that I locked up, which, by the way, are right here. So here's my yo-yo cabinet, which is inaccessible to me at the moment, and here's the the few Decade versions that I've got access to in the event of an emergency, which certainly can take place. But anyway, here's the original A, and I can kind of show you the ways in which it really differs considerably from what we've got right now. So you can see that kind of slope of the shoulder is still sort of there. These guys line up pretty well. This one's a little bit more rounded, and it kind of is much more wide at the gap. And the reason for that really is in 2011, 2012, I was doing a lot of fixed axle, but it was almost all like, what can I hit Spirit Bomb on, or what can I hit, Suicide Zone, or what can I hit hooks on, or whatever, like 1A tricks, And it really wasn't until kind of in this 2012 year that I was exploring a lot more of like what elements suit fixed axle yo-yos as opposed to like, what weird 1A stuff can I do on wood. So this gap got a little bit narrower as the A kind of matured. But yeah, if you take this guy apart, it's just got a steel axle, and the original guts of it, it's got a kind of a thick, kind of Tom Kuhn-esque hemlock axle sleeve.
That might even just be a Tom Kuhn axle, right?
No, it's actually considerably thick, like burlier and thicker than the no jive ones. But yeah, it's the same design, same idea, and it just plugs in there, and you can see there's these little dimples. And then what was funny is in the beginning, these guys were snappy enough to work. As time went on, they lost a lot of their traction. So I ended up having to put multiple completely dead Duncan friction stickers in there to kind of give it any kind of friction whatsoever. So obviously that's could not be more different from what we've got in the current and most recent model, which is this super deep response groove, and the groove comes out of the design for the 2020 Fremont yo-yo that Colin did, and I really liked the way that it responded, and I asked him if he could do a version in this one, and he really knocked it out of the park. We went through several different looks at this during the prototyping phase, and this was the one that really ended up playing the best when it broke in. So.
Over on my Patreon, I've got a couple questions for you.
Okay.
David B asks, how are you involved in the design process? And I guess kind of what we're wondering is what the technical aspect is. Do you start with drawing on paper, or how does it start from the beginning?
Well, it's really funny. I mean, that original, this slope is really based on what Steve Buffel produced on his drill press. The drill press kind of created that initial shape that we ended up with, and everything since then has been kind of has stayed fairly the same. What changes is I'll tell Colin this year can we design something that's thinner, like last year's pocket version, which is designed to really fit in a thin jeans kind of pocket, and then he'll take the original version or the most recent version that we've done, and he'll actually create several different sizes and weights and wood types, and he'll send those protos to me, and we'll both play them. We'll both spend a lot of time talking about them, the virtues of their different masses and diameters and all that stuff, And we'll kind of settle on like, okay, here's what we like the most. And some years, like last year with the Pocket, we ended up releasing like 4 different versions. We had a maple version, a cherry version, an oak version, and then a Spectraply version. They were all different weights, and they all played really, really differently. But then other years, we'll just do one in like, oak. So I'm very involved in the prototyping phase, but usually in terms of the design phase, I ask Colin nicely, like, hey, can you do something like this? And then he'll send me 3 or 4 outstanding things, which I then have to decide between using some arbitrary criteria, which usually amounts to which one do I like the most.
Don't want to correct you, Ed, but it is pronounced the Pocket.
The Pocket, exactly. Yes, that is absolutely correct. Just like the decade.
Decade. the throw of the decade.
That's correct. Or I should have like wrote it out like decade, and then the A would be EH, right? That would have made more sense, but it didn't occur to me until after I wrote it out the first time. So that's what we're stuck with.
So this yo-yo's sold out. How many of these were made?
I don't know. Somewhere around like 60 in this initial run, I think. But I think Colin plans to make more and send more to Andre through your expert. And I know Andre has mentioned several times that he intends to release another set of them. I don't know if it's late winter, early spring, something like that. But yeah, definitely. And again, all gratitude, because I never expect these. This is such a weird niche thing, like having a handcrafted, super specific boutique wooden fixed axle yo-yo. Like that's not like the typical mainstream yo-yo market right now, and I totally know that. So the fact that it sells out at all is like kind of shocking and wonderful to me. And yeah, definitely kind of don't want to leave anybody wanting it and not able to get it. It's not meant to be like this super exclusive thing. It's really limited by what Colin can produce.
It's a question here from Kinsey. What do you think is the most provocative thing about throwing a fixed axle as opposed to throwing, a wooden transaxle? Or sorry, metal transaxle.
Yeah, to me, it's kind of like the comparison between acoustic and electric instruments always works really well for me. And I mean, I love, playing, electric bass or like electric guitar. It's got a very specific tonality and you use it in specific circumstances, and people can hear it and appreciate it in a certain, way and context. And acoustic, instruments are different, but they're not inferior. And I think that playing them, literally feeling the air explode inside, an acoustic bass, as opposed to going through some circuitry into an amp and having it come out that way, and going through some processing. It distances you a little bit from what comes out. And I feel like that's true of ball bearings and modern, unresponsive 1A yo-yos, which are, by and large, they're meant to kind of protect you and really distance you from the response. They were developed so that we could hit tricks more easily and take ourselves further away from the part of the yo-yo that's going to snap back at you really, really quickly. So I think part of what I find provocative, I don't know if provocative is, the word I'd use exactly, but part of what I find appealing and or enlightening about throwing wood is the fact that there's nothing to hide behind. It's just you and your skill set or your practice, and it's easier for me to feel like myself when I'm throwing that kind of yo-yo. It's easier for me to kind of feel like I'm a more authentic, version of myself as a yo-yo player when I'm throwing a simpler yo-yo. And, I don't know that I have a better way to state it than that. It's if I did feel like my most authentic yo-yo playing self when I was throwing a really wide, ball bearing yo-yo that was super unresponsive, then I would do that and I would be totally content. And there's plenty of players who do that. And I'm not like trying to like throw shade at them or knock them or say that like, oh, wood's the only way, anything like that. It's just the way that's worked for me, and it's helped me kind of find a very, I guess an oddity of a style, but it's mine, and I've kind of become somewhat attached to it, I guess.
Right on. Yeah, you've really owned the style. Like kind of, it's synonymous. I think with the things that you've created, along with like Drew Tate's and but yeah, like it's hard to separate responsive wooden yo-yoing or what would you like to call 0A.
Right.
With what you do and the tricks that you created are kind of like the the staples, like the kickflip, which I still can't freaking land.
And all deference, the kickflip is actually Drew's.
Oh.
I've done an awful lot of them, but yeah, that one definitely is his jurisdiction creatively. And I do think also that like one thing that's playing casually with friends, like at Worlds or other contests, and playing, we always kind of devolve into like, well, let's see what you can hit on like this Imperial, or let's see what you can hit on this like really simple basic yo-yo, and we have so much fun just kind of messing around with that stuff. And then that kind of gradually, like you mentioned the kickflip, like, after Drew hit that trick, it really became more about what are these yo-yos like best for? Like, what's the direction they, like stylistically, there's way more room to play with this than we thought, like it seemed like fixed axle yo-yos was, really about up and down and, flyaway dismounts and hitting weird tricks as an anomaly, but they really work spectacularly for stall tricks and stop and go tricks and regens and things that people hadn't necessarily, caught on to, even just a decade ago. And you would think that like these yo-yos would be the first ones to like extinguish all creative possibilities. But in fact, there's an entire landscape that like, my mind can't even touch. So lots of work left to do.
The thing that really gets me about like modern responsive / 0A, play mm-hmm. is when I first started yo-yoing in like late 99, I think people had already thought they'd pretty much found all the tricks possible. And at this point, it's just a matter of just being able to do them faster, or being able to do them two-handed. And we're constantly seeing this innovation. And oftentimes the new tricks are made possible by technology, but it cracks me up to think like we could have been doing any of these like kick flips and stalls and stuff. Like that's not technology. That literally could have been done with Pedro Flores, as long as it can sleep for like a millisecond, you can do these tricks. Right. And it's super fun to think that we just kind of reinvented tricks or invented tricks with old school yo-yos. They may interrupt, but yeah, that just cracks me up.
That's like the coolest part of this, to me is on the one hand, like it, doing, shoot the moon or doing, pinwheel stuff or hydrogen bomb like that links you to some of those great, players of previous generations. But at the same time, like you mentioned, like kind of lurking within this yo-yo, there's also like this weird creative space, this weird universe of stuff that like, God, we haven't got it all yet, and we functionally never will. And that's true of modern unresponsive yo-yos too. It's just, I think since 2001 or so, like you mentioned, like we've already realized that like, man, that's got a ton of space, but these do too, which is wild.
Any goal for 2022?
Yeah, I mean, I want to play for myself. No, that's not the right way to say it. I want to stop kind of caring about what comes out. I want to kind of, play a little bit more naturally, a little more authentically. And I feel like I said earlier, I do that best when I strip things away a little bit. So I think that my goal is really to, at the end of the year, feel like in some ways I've kind of like made the same journey that I made in 2012, and kind of, walked the same line and went through the same kind of like, mental states that playing one yo-yo for a really, really long time will take you through. But above all, I just want to kind of get closer to just who I think I am as a yo-yo player. and kind of test that hypothesis and see if like that's accurate, or like maybe that's wrong. Maybe it takes me in a completely different direction. Either way, it'll be the right answer. So I'm just looking forward to, the goal would be looking forward to the journey, and seeing where I am with regard to this at the end of it.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for chatting. Best of luck with 2022. I hope you have a happy new year, and maybe in a few months we'll get together again for another fixed axle 5A battle.
Yeah, that was a blast.
That was fun.
I would be totally down with that. Yes, but thank you just for having me out here, and it's lovely to get to see you, quasi almost in person. So.
Well, cheers, dude. Thanks for hanging out.
All right. Take it easy, man.